Hello everyone, I'm Robin Pearson and I'm here to show you what remains of the Church of St. Sergius and Bacchus in Istanbul. This is one of the most beautiful Byzantine buildings in the city. It was built by Justinian before the Hagia Sophia, and though it looks quite different since its conversion into a mosque, its structure is largely the same, showcasing the innovation and skill of Roman architects. Sergius and Bacchus were junior officers in the Roman army during the 3rd century AD. They were martyred for their Christian faith by the pagan authorities, but the spot where Sergius was buried began to work miracles. The fame of these two saints grew, and eventually a shrine was built at Rasafa in Syria near to Sergius's grave. By the early 6th century, the cult of Sergius and Bacchus had spread across the empire. The decision to build a church for the saints in Constantinople was taken by Justinian. Justinian's family were peasant farmers from the Balkans, whose rise to power was a genuine rags-to-riches story. When his uncle Justin became emperor in 518, Justinian suddenly found himself heir apparent, much to the chagrin of the well-to-do elites of the capital. Justinian sponsored several churches during the next decade, determined to prove his worthiness through these beautiful shrines. The church of St. Sergius and Bacchus was built within the precincts of the Hormisdas Palace, Justinian's residence during his uncle's reign. In 525 he was elevated to the rank of Caesar, practically confirmation that he was to be the next emperor. The new church may have been commissioned to become the Caesar's own chapel, where official ceremonies could be performed. The lavish design and decoration may also have been a riposte to the new church of St. Polyeuctus, at that time the finest church in the city, commissioned by one of his rivals, Anicia Juliana, the daughter and granddaughter of former emperors. Once he became emperor, Justinian moved out of the Hormisdas Palace, and a monastery was established there to run the church. The most famous incident associated with the building took place shortly afterwards. The Pope Vigilius was brought to Constantinople by Justinian in order to settle various religious disputes. Under imperial pressure, the pontiff ended up fleeing to the church's sanctuary and was nearly dragged out by Justinian's soldiers until sympathetic bystanders intervened. Over time, the building became associated with visiting a Latin clergy, who were encouraged to hold their services there while staying at the capital. The quality of its construction and its location within the palace precinct kept the church safe from alteration across the Byzantine centuries. The building was then converted into a mosque in the early 16th century by Hüseyin Efendi, one of Bayezid II's chief eunuchs. It was renamed Küçük Hagia Sophia Camii, the Little Hagia Sophia Mosque, because of its resemblance to the great cathedral church. Since then, the building has required constant maintenance. Earthquakes in 1648 and 1763 demanded restoration work, and then in the 1860s a railway was built 5 meters from the south wall. The constant vibrations from passing carriages have taken their toll, and in the mid-2000s the building was again given a makeover, leaving it in the clean and well-painted state that I found it in 2018. The bones of the building are still Byzantine, but much else of what you can see are later additions as part of the conversion into a mosque. The courtyard, portico, and obviously the minaret are all Islamic. The entranceway and all the windows have been altered, and the boarded and carpeted floor is 17 centimetres above the original. A patch of this Byzantine marble floor was uncovered and left exposed for visitors to see, but that part of the building was off limits when I visited. The layout of the internal space has remained largely unchanged, and here we can see the genius and foolishness of Byzantine construction on display. As you can see from this plan, the building is rectangular, but the central part is octagonal. But the octagon is misaligned. This could be because the church was built between two other palace structures which were not aligned with one another. However, that doesn't explain all the other irregularities that you can find within the building. Sides of the octagon are of different lengths, and the doors are unevenly placed. Several scholars suggest that the original plans were not followed closely, and the builders had to improvise as their mistakes became apparent. The results, though, are still beautiful, and show the clever solutions which Byzantine architects of the day were applying to church design. As you can see, the building's focus is its central dome, rather than the long aisle common in basilica churches of the day. The challenge for the architects was to hold up the dome without smothering the central space with a row of columns to hold the dome aloft. The solution was this octagonal shape, supported by 8 wide arches which spread out the heavy piers which hold up the dome. In between each arch are 2 columns, offering extra support and creating space through which the service could be viewed from the galleries above or the ambulatory below. The result is extremely pleasing on the eye and foreshadowed many of the decisions which were made in the construction of the Hagia Sophia just a few years later. Fitting the circular dome onto the octagonal shape also required ingenuity. The dome is divided into 16 ribs, 8 flat and 8 concave. As you can see here, the concave parts connect to the piers below, maintaining the octagonal shape, while the flat ribs are each pierced with windows, allowing light to flood in. This clever solution means that the dome has a corrugated or undulating appearance from the outside. Back inside, obviously these painted walls and patterns are all Islamic. We have to use our imagination to recreate the Byzantine interior, of which Procopius said that by the sheen of its marbles it was more resplendent than the sun. We can get a helping hand in picturing this from the Basilica of San Vital in Ravenna. Built a few years after Sergius and Bacchus, it had quite a similar design and retains its original decoration. Fortunately for us, several elements of the original decoration of Sergius and Bacchus have also remained in place. The brightly coloured curtain of columns, for one, as John Freely puts it. The green are made of verd antique and the red Cinada marble. The capitals show the finesse of Byzantine craftsmen as acanthus leaves spread across every side, while marking the centre of many are monograms of Theodora, Justinian, or his title, Vasilevs, Emperor. Above the lower columns is a frieze with a long dedicatory inscription in Greek. Other sovereigns have honoured dead men whose labour was unprofitable, but our sceptred Justinian, fostering piety, honours with a splendid abode the servant of Christ, begetter of all things, Sergius, whom not the burning breath of fire, nor the sword, nor any other constraint of torments disturbed, but who endured to be slain for the sake of Christ the God, gaining by his blood heaven as his home. May he in all things guard the rule of the sleepless sovereign, and increase the power of the God-crowned Theodora, whose mind is adorned with piety, whose constant toil lies in unsparing efforts to nourish the destitute. It's wonderful to have this still accessible. It reinforces the unusually prominent place that Theodora had in Justinian's administration, and also suggests that the emperor was taking a dig at someone with its construction. That first line, "Other sovereigns have honoured dead men whose labour was unprofitable," has been taken to be a comment on Anicia Juliana's choice of Saint Polyeuctus, a fellow military saint, but one with much less of a following than Sergius. Here, Justinian shouts proud about the achievements of his saint, whose wonderful shrine naturally reflects very well on the man who commissioned it. You may also notice that Bacchus is not mentioned in the inscription. Sergius was the more prominent of the two in the legends, and it was his remains which were said to work miracles. It's free to visit the mosque, and it's a lovely, peaceful place to escape the bustle or the sun. You could easily combine it with a trip to the Hippodrome or the Bucolian Palace. When I visited, I was unable to go upstairs to see the space from the gallery, which was disappointing. An experienced tour guide might be able to get you access. Not only would it allow you a better view, but it would also put you on the very spot where emperors across the centuries came annually for a service in the church. If you'd like more detailed information about the Church of St. Sergius and Bacchus, then visit thebyzantinelegacy.com. It's a fantastic website providing breakdowns of the Byzantine buildings that can still be seen today, and there you'll find most of the still images and sketches used in these videos. If you'd like more information about Justinian and Theodora, then check out these episodes of the History of Byzantium podcast.